computer, that tonight's session will be recorded. So if you prefer not to be seen, please take off your camera feature. And please note that you will also be recorded when asking a question. So the recording of tonight's gathering can and will be accessible within 24 hours via your purchased products on the Vimeo weekly Dharma Gathering account. Okay. So for those of you who have not been with us for weekly Dharma Gathering, I'll just let you know how this goes. I will introduce myself. My name is Shante Paradigm Smalls. I'm the co-founder and the curator of weekly Dharma Gathering. And then I will introduce the teacher. The teacher will give a 20-minute meditation, guided meditation, and then talk about 20 to 30 minutes. Then we'll have Q&A, and then we'll have announcements, and we'll close around 8:15, 8:30. So my name is Shante Paradigm Smalls, and I'd like to welcome you to the weekly Dharma Gatherings, our second talk on our new platform, Vimeo, LTT. And we launched originally in February and are really excited to be on this new platform. And I'm even more delighted to have tonight's session led by Lama Owens, whose talk is titled The Dharma of Resiliency. Lama Owens is considered one of the emerging leaders of his generation of Buddhist teachers. An author, activist, and formerly authorized Buddhist teacher in the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism, he is the co-founder of Bhumishvara, a Buddhist tantric practice community, as well as a visiting teacher with several Buddhist centers, including the Natural Dharma Fellowship and the Brooklyn Zen Center. A graduate of Harvard Divinity School, Lama has also been a guest faculty member at the Harvard School of Education's program, Mindfulness for Educators. He has been a regular guest on SiriusXM's Urban View, hosted by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Karen Hunter. He is also a co-author of a book some of you may know, Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love, and Liberation. And his next book project, exploring transformative anger and rage, is due out fall 2019. Lama can be reached at www.lamarad.com. So I'm just so excited to have you here, and please teach us.
All right, thank you, everyone, including Shante, especially Shante. Thank you for inviting me to be on tonight, and I'm really excited about, just being here and just, talking about things that I feel very moved to talk about. And to everyone else who's gathered, thank you for being here and being on the call tonight. So we are exploring the Dharma of resiliency. And of course, this is something that I've been very drawn to lately, particularly because of the ways in which many people are feeling deeply depleted right now, given the state of many political, social issues, and environmental issues. And also, on top of that, interpersonal issues that we're going through in our personal lives, it can seem like a lot. And so much of how I came into Dharma practice and becoming a teacher is actually based on my need to, or it was based upon my experience, rather, of feeling depleted and feeling overwhelmed by the world, by relationships, by issues, and so forth. So my Dharma that I developed was really about, how do I survive this body? How do I survive systems? How do I survive institutions? How do I survive samsara? How do I survive, a world where there seems to be so much more disconnection and distance between people than connection and intimacy. So I really feel called to kind of share some of the practices that I have been doing for years and some newer practices that I've developed, especially to meet the things that we're experiencing right now in our lives. So we'll start with a practice, and then we'll move into, a talk, share a few words, and then we'll have some space for questions and answers as well. Or rather, you'll ask a question, I'll, pretend to answer or make up an answer or whatever. You won't know the difference really. And so I think that we can begin pretty much. So when I begin practice, I like to do several things. The first thing I like to do is first invite my body to come into a position of rest and ease that can support a formal meditation practice. So at this point, I invite you to ask your body what it needs and how it needs to be in this moment. So essentially allowing the body to answer and adjusting to what your body needs right now. So allowing the body to come into a position of ease. And it's not that we're trying to completely limit all uncomfortable sensation. That's really quite impossible for many of us. But what we're trying to do is limit as much as we can so what we are experiencing in our sitting practice doesn't become so distracting for us in the practice. So allowing the body to come to a position of ease and just noticing as much as you can the sensations that the body is offering us. And sensations are essentially the language that the body speaks to us through. So let our bodies tell us what it needs through the sensations that we're noticing from it. And I want you to feel empowered to make adjustments to the practice, to your sitting, and to your physical posture based upon the sensations that your body is offering as communication. There can really be no liberation without the body. Even the Buddha realized that as he attempted to obtain enlightenment, and doing so initially by completely distancing himself from the body. He was basically starving himself, believing that the body was not important, that the body was a roadblock, an obstacle. We're fortunate that the Buddha realized that there had to be a union, an integration of awareness and body. And he wasn't the first person to realize this. This is the wisdom of yoga, which had been in existence thousands and thousands of years before the Buddha was born. But he had to realize that, the truth of this integration on his own, through his own experience. And so this is the work that we're doing now. We're doing the work of understanding the conversation between mind and body, awareness in the physical. We're understanding that each of our bodies tell very different narratives, very different stories about pain and pleasure and trauma and spaciousness. Developing a sensitivity to what our body's telling us through its sensations. Regulating what feels overwhelming. And taking care of ourselves by figuring out what we can hold space for and what we should actually turn away from now as a means, as a way to be skillful with experiences of pain and woundedness. So I invite you now to bring your attention to your seat. You're noticing the weight of your body resting on your seat. I want you to notice the reality of gravity, how gravity keeps us held to the seat. And I wonder in this moment if you can trust the seat to hold you. And in trusting the seat to hold you, I wonder if you can surrender to being held by the seat. Letting go of doubts, anxiety, fear that the seat won't hold you. Because these are the same doubts and fear and anxiety that you struggle with in other parts of your life, in your relationships with folks who continually hurt you over and over again, with people and systems and institutions and groups that continually let go of you, that continually disappoint you. For some of us, it is impossible to trust anything or anyone. So I invite you right now to try trusting the seat, your seat, that the seat will hold you, that gravity will hold you. And I encourage you to rest and relax within this holding. And now I invite you to bring your attention to your breath, breathing in and out through the nose. And as you're breathing, allowing that breath to deepen and elongate. If you can, I want you to breathe in through your nose for a count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold the breath. And now exhale through the nose to a count of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And continue that pattern of breathing in for a count of 5 and then exhaling for a count of 8. And if that seems too intense, just breathing through your nose, inhaling through your nose, and then exhaling longer than it took you to inhale. So keeping that breath going helps us to relax. It helps us to deactivate the stress in the central nervous system. It calms us, it settles us. And now I invite you to turn your attention to the base of your spine. And I invite you to imagine that as you're breathing up and down the spine. So as you're inhaling, imagine that you're inhaling up the spine, up to the very top of your head, and then down the spine as you exhale, again, all through the nose. So inhaling up the spine, exhaling down the spine. So I want you to check in with yourself. Are you allowing the seat to hold you? Do you trust the seat? Are you surrendering to gravity and to the seat? Are you breathing? Does your breath feel constricted or tight? So just checking in. And whatever you find is okay. It's where you're at right now, and that's fantastic. So much about our practice concerning resiliency is really about learning how to accept things as they are. And when we accept things as they are, it doesn't mean that we're condoning anything. It doesn't mean that we're celebrating anything, as we're not happy about accepting things as they are. But all we're doing, first and foremost, is simply telling ourselves that this is actually happening. This is a reality. This is not a figment of my imagination. So ultimately, we know that absolutely in the absolute, there's no such thing as reality or samsara. Everything's empty and open and spacious. But that's not where we're at right now. We are in the relative. We are on the ground with the shit and the mud and the silliness and the confusion and the ignorance. And instead of continuing to deny the truth of this, we do ourselves the biggest act of compassion that we could possibly imagine for ourselves. And that is telling ourselves the truth that this shit is happening. Shit is happening in the world. Shit is happening in my life. And I want to touch the ground, finally, and accept it. If we can't accept it, if we can't touch the ground, then we will never be able to change anything. We will never be able to experience liberation without first touching the ground, and accepting and acknowledging. The Buddha showed us this as he approached enlightenment after he got hip to the idea that he needed his body. He realized that not only did he need his body, he needed the earth. And he performed the Bhumi Sparsha Mudra. The Bhumi Sparsha Mudra is the touching the earth mudra, where as he prepared to step into full and total enlightenment, he called on the earth to validate his right to be enlightened. And touching the earth means that he accepted everything. And the earth was a validation and a realization for him that everything was finally being accepted and he could now enter into full enlightenment. But as we move deeper into this practice, I wonder, what are some of the things that you're not accepting, that you're not opening to? What are some of the lies that you keep telling yourself? What are some of the things that you keep bypassing? I wonder, in the space that we're cultivating, I wonder if you can open up to at least one thing right now, allowing yourself to touch into the reality of this thing, of this realization, accepting it, touching into the ground of its truth. And as you touch into this reality, I wonder if you can just tell yourself, you know what, this is okay. This is okay. It's okay. One of the things that keeps us from touching into the reality of these things and accepting the reality of these things is the, the real threat that as we acknowledge this thing, our hearts will break. So I say, fuck it. Let your heart break. Let your heart break wide open. And as your heart breaks open, again, you say, you know what, this is okay. And that mantra, it's okay, actually helps to soften our heart even more. And it opens the door to another statement, to another contemplation, which is the realization that you are not the only person in the world whose heart is breaking. There are countless beings whose hearts are breaking in this moment because they too are trying to tap into the reality of what's happening for them right now. What increases and deepens the sense of suffering is the belief that we're the only ones, which is an expression of isolation. So to cut through the burden of isolation, we turn our minds to the reality that so many other beings are experiencing exactly what I'm experiencing in this very exact moment. And I, therefore, am not alone. Don't let yourself be alone as you come into this reality and the heartbreak. I believe the reason that we're experiencing so much violence right now and so much aggression in the world is because people believe that they're alone in their pain, in their fear, their woundedness, their trauma. And to cut through that illusion of isolation, we open our minds, we open our hearts to the reality that I am not the only one. I am not the only one. When I say I am not the only one, I enter into a community a collective or even a family of other people who are doing the heavy labor of letting their hearts break. And it's okay. The spaciousness of my mind and the depth of my awareness is much greater, much wider, more expansive than any experience I could ever have, particularly any experience of suffering. I can allow my heart to break because I have the spaciousness in my mind to hold the totality of a broken heart. I do not have to shrink and contract into the experience of brokenness. I expand out from it. I hold my broken heart in the same way that the mother holds a child that she deeply loves. And if you feel resourced and supported enough right now, and it's okay if you don't, but if you do, I encourage you to turn your mind to another contemplation, which is as I am holding this heartbreak, as I am accepting the reality of things, I am developing and giving rise to an aspiration that may I take on the discomfort of all beings experiencing a broken heart right now. May I take on the suffering of all broken hearts in this world and all the worlds, and may all beings be freed from the suffering of a broken heart. And may beings never experience this kind of discomfort again. So opening up into that aspiration, that deep wish for beings to be free from the suffering. And allow your heart and your mind to expand and widen to hold this aspiration. Now I invite you to return your attention back to your seat, returning to the reality of the weight of your body, the reality of gravity, keeping us to our seats. Bringing our attention also back to the breath, breathing in and out through the nose. Deep, long breaths. And as we move out of our practice for this evening, I want you to offer the merit or the positive energy of this practice. And I want you to dedicate this positive energy first to yourself. You can actually think, I dedicate the positive energy to myself, to my effort, to my diligence, to my compassion and love, to my open-mindedness. I dedicate the merit of this practice to deepen this practice for myself. And then once you have dedicated this energy to yourself, I want you to turn your attention outward and to dedicate this energy, this merit, to all other beings. That all beings may enjoy and benefit from this energy that we've created in our practice. So much of our practice around resiliency has to be about learning how to drink for ourselves as we pour for others. Without our sustaining ourselves and taking care of ourselves, we will not be able to benefit other beings. So I give to myself in the same way I give to others. I restore myself in the same way I restore others. I love myself in the same way I love others. I have compassion for myself in the same way I have compassion for others. I benefit myself in the same way I benefit others. I pleasure myself in the same way I offer pleasure to others. Let yourself be taken care of. And be an agent in your self-care. And in the words and thinking of Mother Audre Lorde, our self-care is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. Self-preservation is an act of political warfare. It is political warfare because when we take care of ourselves, when we provide for ourselves, when we nourish ourselves, we sustain ourselves, we thrive and survive. And when we thrive and survive, we disrupt the systems that were created to annihilate us. It is political warfare because we refuse to succumb to the agenda of the system. And we do that simply through self-care, drinking as we pour, eating as we feed others. So allowing yourself to slowly come out of this practice. And as we come out of it, gently, if our eyes are closed, gently opening our eyes and beginning to do some small movements to reawaken and to re-engage with the body. I like to call this the Mariah Carey, and the Mariah Carey is Shake It Off. Not to be confused with the Taylor Swift Shake It Off. I don't know who Taylor Swift is, but I know who Mariah Carey is, and we're going to shake it off. Okay, we're going to shake it off. So lifting your arms above your head, getting a nice stretch upward, filling the upper torso, the lower back stretch and expand, releasing that energy that's built up in the back and in the gut and the upper chest. Breathing deeply, exhaling, releasing that energy through the mouth this time. Keeping that stretch going up, looking up at our hands, stretching the throat and the front of the neck. Inhaling and exhaling now, our arms down. Doing some twisting in our chair, feeling the twisting coming from the lower spine, moving up into the back and neck. Bending over now from the hip and the waist area. Letting our heads drop down just above our chests. Releasing the tension in our upper back, feeling the stretch down into our mid backs. Breathing right into the center of the spine there. And letting that inhale create a lot of spaciousness. And as you exhale, feeling that relaxation in the mid back. Now taking a nice big inhale through the nose. And as we exhale, beginning to straighten ourselves, stacking vertebrae by vertebrae, coming back up into an upright seated position and posture. And exhaling the rest of that breath through the mouth. Lifting our shoulders up to our ears, feeling the stretch under our arms. Inhaling deeply, exhaling, rolling our shoulders to the back. And bringing our shoulders down. Bringing our attention now to our faces where we hold a lot of tension and intensity and aggression. Beginning to relax different parts of our faces, beginning with our forehead, breathing into the forehead, breathing out as we breathe out, relaxing the forehead. And breathing in, imagine you're breathing into the eyes, breathing into the eye sockets. Exhaling out of the eye sockets and relaxing the eyes. Now breathing into our noses up into our nasal cavity. As we exhale, relaxing the nasal cavity. And we can relax our nasal cavity by imagining the sensation of beginning to yarn, beginning to open and widening that nasal cavity, feeling that expansion in the nasal cavity. Now breathing through the mouth, inhaling, exhaling, relaxing our jaw, our shoulders, our neck. Noticing stillness, whatever experiences of stillness that you connect to in the mind or in the body. A little mini shavasana, this corpse pose that we do at the end of our yoga practice. Dropping the tension, dropping the drama, dropping all the remnants of our practice, just letting go of everything, resting the mind, letting the mind anchor itself on our seats. Or you may let your mind anchor within this natural open awareness, within the mind, within the body. Okay. Thank you so much for your practice, for your diligence, for your effort, for your beauty, for your sassiness, everything. Thank you so much for joining me for this practice. I'll just say a few words for the next few minutes, and then we'll open up for questions around 8 or so. So for those of you who are joining us, thank you for joining us. If you weren't here at the beginning of the call, it's really nice to have you on the call. Also, especially for those of you who know, who I know, especially for those of you who I may owe an email or a text or a phone call to. You're going to get those at some point. So this is Dharma Resiliency. I've been doing a lot of teaching on self-care, self-preservation. You can see this material online, videos, talks, and so forth. And it's been something that's really important for me. This is work that's coming out in my next book, which is not going to be in the fall, but it will be next spring. This kind of Dharma resiliency for me, resiliency is really about how I'm able to find a kind of balance and a kind of rhythm in the world. This rhythm of essentially falling down and getting back up again. This kind of openness, this kind of balance, where I'm able to hold space for everything that arises for me in my experience and for everything that I encounter. As my root teacher, Norla Rinpoche, used to say, whatever happens, happens, whatever comes, comes. At the end of the day, I don't need anything at all. And that's been such a cornerstone of this Dharma resiliency for me, because that quote actually reminds me of the ways in which my resiliency is based upon trust in my practice. And so people come to me all the time, they're like, oh, Lama Rod, the world is coming to an end, blah, 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 the environment, blah, 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 the president, blah, 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 are like my favorite, show on Netflix or Hulu is being canceled, blah, 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 and I get that and I hear that and my heart goes out for that, But I look at them and I say, what about your practice though? I wonder, we're anxious about the world, but we have this practice. No matter how long we've been practicing, we have a practice. And I wonder if we can invest a little bit of trust and confidence in our practice, to trust our practice to meet what arises for us as it arises, and that's the only way that I make it through. is by trusting my practice, trusting my compassion, trusting my love, trusting my kindness, trusting my patience, trusting that I can give, that I can sense the mother, the deity, or Tara in everything that arises every day for me, that I can sense, I can connect to my capacity to have an open heart for people who are attempting to hurt me, that I can see their intention to hurt me, but I can also connect to the ways in which their violence towards me is actually emerging from a violence deep inside themselves in which they are also victimized by. To have that trust that my practice is enough, that whatever I'm able to do to cultivate a practice, that it will be enough. And, so I bring that back to people. I say, what about your practice? You're worried about the future. You're worried about what's going to happen, but what about your practice in this moment? Where's your mind at? Where's your body? How are you breathing? What are you loving? What are you hating? What are you doing right now? And I think that I think so many of us want to be like superheroes and superheroines and this and that, and I think we have such an overabundance of superhero movies right now because people are needing to be reminded that they're powerful, that there's a potentiality to overcome even the most intense obstacles. And our superhuman ability, every being has a superhuman ability, Some of your superhuman abilities is, throwing shade and being sassy and being argumentative and being attitudinal. And by the way, we don't need any more people with that superhuman ability. I think we have a lot of that happening in the world. We have an overabundance of bad attitudes right now. Instead, I want you to actually focus on your superhuman ability to be expansive, to be patient, to be kind, and to let your practice work for you. And that's the key thing. I think that's the key thing that I'm experiencing with people right now, is that like people feel as if, oh, I have to do this, I have to fix that, I have to figure out that system, I have to go, that's all well and fine, but you are limited. Whomever you are limited. We we can only do so much. However, our practice is boundless. Our patience is boundless. Our love is boundless. Our compassion is boundless. And I actually want to focus more on compassion, because compassion is not this kind of like flimsy kind of like, this kind of thing, where it's like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not passive. Authentic compassion is not passive. Authentic compassion is quite powerful, because authentic compassion recognizes suffering. It recognizes suffering in our experience. It recognizes suffering in the experiences of other people. And it encourages us to go to the root of suffering, and to disrupt suffering. There is nothing more intense than authentic compassion. And if we can simply trust that for ourselves, if we can trust our innate ability to tune into our own suffering, if we can trust the work of tuning into other people's suffering through the support of our suffering, and then giving rise to this aspiration to disrupt suffering for ourselves and others, then we can move into this kind of act of compassion where we're actually moving through the world being guided by this deep sensitivity to suffering. And you say, oh, Lama, this is so overwhelming. This is so much easier. You're like this Lama and this superstar, and all that's very true, but like at the end of the day, what I am doing is simply trying to give a shit about myself and about other people, and trying to do my best to offer remedies, to offer medicine to the world, not poison, not obstacles, not more sassiness, not more shade. People don't need me to read, all the time. I'm not trying to read everyone. I'm trying to care for people. I'm trying to allow my heart to break. I'm trying to show people that I am with them in the suffering, and to let people know that, like, samsara is doing what samsara is supposed to do. Like, this isn't abnormal. Like, oh, we're like, oh my God, the world is like, it's bullshit and it's crap and it's like yada yada. That's exactly what is supposed to happen. That is the meaning of samsara. Samsara is the manifestation of ignorance, and ignorance means violence. It means fragmentation. It means distance. It means a lack of intimacy. It means ambiguity. It means suspicion. It means distrust. All that's what samsara is trying to do. However, we're trying to disrupt our relationship to samsara. We are in samsara, but we are not of samsara. I am not an expression of ignorance, but ignorance is what I've been informed by. But as I work through developing compassion and wisdom, which are two wings, these two wings that we're trying to fly away in with, we're trying to fly out of ignorance into wisdom, into clarity, into openness. We're trying to fly out of samsara into clarity, and samsara will always be samsara, but we don't have to stay here for it. We can leave ignorance behind, and not only can we leave ignorance behind, we can help others leave it behind. So this is incredibly important as we talk about resiliency and, talk about moving forward in the world. It's like, let the world do what the world is supposed to do. Meanwhile, you're using your practice in order to create wisdom and light and clarity and love, and to show other people how to do that so people can start getting the hell out of here. That we're not going to save samsara. That's not how this works, but we can develop clarity which helps to transform our experience of samsara. There are people who living in the world right now. There are beings walking the face of this planet who are they're deeply full of joy and happiness and patience. They're not like living in alternative reality. They're living in the world with us. They're in samsara with us, but their relationship to samsara has changed. And because their relationship to samsara has changed, they're actually showing so many other people how to transform their relationship to samsara as well. And if we want to get into that business of transforming our relationship to samsara, we can't be so afraid of our broken hearts. Our broken hearts is the doorway into this transformation. We have to come into an intimate relationship with our own hurt. And when we touch into our own hurt, we can actually practice that. When we touch into our own hurt, we begin to touch into the hurt of all beings. And I begin to have the realization that I am not the only one going through this. And if I don't want to go through this, probably other people and other beings don't want to go through this. Therefore, what do I need to do to disrupt this experience of suffering for myself and others? What am I going to do? Knowing that, like, I probably won't be like a Dr. King or a Mother Teresa, or, whomever. We won't be Beyonce. We're not going to be Lizzo. We're not going to be some of our favorite people, or Michelle Obama, or Barack Obama. We're not going to be those people. We can be ourselves, though, and that's just as important. I can be myself, and I can liberate beings around me just simply by being my most authentic, direct self, which is exactly what these other people were doing. They were just themselves, So that's, like, in a nutshell, this understanding of this Dharma of resiliency. And again, this Dharma for me, this Dharma of resiliency comes out of my life. It comes out of being a Black queer man, trying to survive a world that actually just wants me dead, that just wants me kind of wiped out off the face of the planet, and developing a Dharma that refuses that annihilation. I refuse to be annihilated. Not as long as I have Dharma, not as long as I have my practice, I refuse to be annihilated. In the same way my ancestors, my slave ancestors, my indigenous First Nations ancestors refused to be annihilated. You know, I refuse to be annihilated, and that's my boundary. I refuse to go anywhere. This is my home. I've been born into a body, therefore I have a right to take up space, just like any other being in this realm. You know, and I have confidence in that, and I choose to be here, and I choose to be happy. You know, so enough of that. Can we? I guess we should open up for questions.
Yes, great.
Anyone have a question? Mm-hmm.
Much, Lama. Just a reminder to everyone that we are recording. So if you don't want to be recorded, your face, your words will be recorded. You can just mute your video. Thank you. And you may also ask questions in the chat box.
Oh, I see. Let me check that.
Someone left, had to go, but you feel nervous about speaking, you can ask questions in the chat.
So David, you have a question. Okay. So David, you can answer that. Hey David, how are you? I see you.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
How have you been?
I'm better now for seeing you.
Oh, that's so sweet. I wish everyone had that experience when seeing me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about this idea and kind of what's up for me these days is this point of like finding resiliency when we take the forms or the advice or the wisdom that's been passed to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's from whatever like background we're coming from, or even if we're taking part in a practice that we didn't grow up in, and we took on those forms because it felt like that it was pointing us in the right direction, but there was a quality of like performing that, even if we weren't really even if it didn't really feel like us or ours. But like this idea of resiliency coming at that moment where we take those forms, we take that advice, that wisdom, whatever it is, and we really make it our own. And I feel like, you know, I learn a lot from you about that, just the way you speak about it and the way you present on it, the way you live it. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit on like what that's meant to you, maybe an example or something where, you know, you were doing a form, you were practicing something that was given to you, handed to you. Maybe it didn't feel 100% authentic or whatever, but then there was a certain moment where it was like, this is mine. I'm going to make this mine. I might change the expression of it, but it's going to be mine. And that's where really that resiliency moment happens. Like, this is mine. This is not somebody else's. I'm not going to try to do it like somebody else's. I'm going to respect the tradition, but I'm going to make it mine.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really good question. And that's a question that has been at the forefront of my practice for a couple of years now, because, you know, in my training as a Lama, it was completely very, very orthodox, very traditional. You know, I train in the same way Tibetan Lamas train. And then going through those forms, I was like, this is so like alien. This is like, everything was so foreign to me, but I had to go through this period where I had to suspend that resistance and the aversion and just like lose myself in the practice. And I think that is important for us, for many of us who are coming into different practices, different paths. I think it's initially, at least for me initially, it meant that like I had to suspend a lot of my aversion and my disbelief, because I had to break through the surface in order to figure out what the essence and the wisdom of the practice was. And so I feel as if I'm doing that more and more these days. And so I've fallen through these forms. I'm able to reemerge out of the forms with the essence of these practices, which feel very authentic to my expression. I think that the essence of a practice is something that's able to move through our identities, and to be expressed outwardly through how we're holding ourselves in the world, or it's expressed outwardly through the ways in which we show up. It's like a prism. So sunlight shines through a prism. The prism breaks that light up into different wavelengths, into the rainbow. And I think that's really how the essence of Dharma works. Like the Dharma comes into us and it's broken out into the world based upon based upon who we are. But I think that to capture the essence of a practice means that you have to go through the forms, and you may not understand the forms, but you do the forms and you let the forms teach you and show you something. And there's a way in which we have to master those forms. And then when we master those forms, we're able to say, okay, how can I best express this in a more authentic way? And that question, or that rather the audacity and the risk taking around that has transformed my practice. Like I get it now. I understand the practice. I'm able to translate the practice because I know what it means for me now. And that's what we have to do now. Like we just can't keep moving through forms and saying, oh, I have to chant like this, I have to visualize like this, I have to move like this, I have to do this, because this is what my teacher said and I have to do it. And like, if I don't do it, then I'm insolent or whatever. No, it's actually, we have to kind of challenge that thinking and ask ourselves, how can I make this practice my own? How can I make this practice authentic? Because if we don't make it authentic, then it won't be sustainable for us. It will be something that won't be able to sink deep into who and what we are, to unravel, our kind of attachment, to identity and to self. It won't be able to get really deep in. And if it doesn't get deep in, we're just performing all these things. And of course, we know that's when we get into a lot of trouble. That's when our teachers start committing a lot of violence. That's when we as teachers actually start committing a lot of violence, when we don't allow ourselves to tap into the essence of the practice and to express that essence in a way that makes sense for us. I think about Tantra, I think about Tibetan Buddhism. I think it's esoteric and hidden and a secret because, quite frankly, most people actually don't know how to talk about it. They don't know what it is because they haven't actually allowed that practice to seep deep into their bones, into their muscles, into their fat, into their blood. It hasn't like saturated them yet. It's just something that they're performing and moving through that has no meaning for them outside of something they think they have to do in order to get resources that they need to be in the world. So we have to earn our Dharma. And now that's that's a phrase I say quite often. We have to earn our Dharma. That means that we have to encounter the practices, we have to metabolize it, we have to chew it, we have to digest it, we have to let it nourish us, we have to let it sink deep into us, and then we have to let it start reproducing like a virus, from deep inside of ourselves. That's when we earn our Dharma. And when our hearts go unbroken, when we don't experience having to touch the ground and having to come into the truth of things, and our hearts breaking, we haven't earned the Dharma. It's just still this performative thing, that we're just kind of sashaying through as if we're doing something, but we're really not.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Definitely.
And I don't want to convey this idea that sashaying is wrong. I love sashaying, but you know, if you're gonna sashay and dharma, like, and just do it, like do the thing, you know, just don't sashay as performance. Sashay because you're owning that, like you're doing the sashay because you know what this dharma means. You know that it's sinking deep in, and you let your body respond to that deepening dharma. You know, when that dharma gets deep inside, it's gonna it changes things. You know, is going to make us show up in ways that we never thought we would show up.
That's that joy, and people who are not even Dharma practitioners, right? They have that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's Dharma has helped me see that in other people who have never meditated a day in their life.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and we have to get out of this thinking that like Dharma practitioners and Buddhists are the most enlightened people in the world. We're not. You know, there are beings on this planet who will never meditate a day in their lives, but they have much more realization about the world than we could possibly ever have. You know, Buddhism Dharma isn't the only way. And even in my practice, I have a much more expansive understanding of Dharma anyway. Dharma isn't necessarily about Buddhism. Dharma for me is just about the manifestation of wisdom. How is wisdom expressing itself? And wisdom expresses itself everywhere. And so I am drawn to how this wisdom is manifesting, not just in Buddhism, but in Christianity and Hinduism. I'm interested in how this Dharma expresses itself, in all manner of spaces. And that's when our minds start to open, we get expansive, we begin to move outside our limitations and to see Dharma everywhere. And in Tantra we say that the guru is always speaking. The guru is speaking through the teacher, the guru is speaking through text, the guru is speaking through, just phenomenal reality. And that's a teaching that's really important for me, because it's like, yeah, so there's teaching all the time. There's teaching everywhere. Every manifestation of phenomena is a teaching, so if I can just get with that, that's Dharma. Not the forms. The forms can help us get to a place where we're receptive, but we have to let go of the forms in order to actually get into a place of really deeply embodying that wisdom. The forms can get in the way after a while, especially if you don't understand them, you don't get them, and you're just doing it to make other people happy. Then unfortunately, we begin to invest a lot of confidence and trust in people who do the performance really well. And yeah, I know people who they're just like perfect. They follow the forms, they know the chanting, they know the language, they know the philosophy, they know the books, they know the lineage, they know all this stuff that's beautiful and wonderful. But quite frankly, I wouldn't trust them, to lead me down the corner, let alone to enlightenment. I mean, quite honestly, and as you grow in your Dharma, and this is for everyone, as we grow in our Dharma, as we grow in our practice, we begin to develop a sense of who's actually embodying wisdom. And we're actually able to see how that wisdom manifests through their particular identity. And that's very exciting for me. I'm very thrilled by that. I love how Dharma is expressed in all kinds of different ways. I love that. It's exciting. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I'm spending a lot of time answering that. Just to, I think one of the things that we can work on right now in the world is how do I choose to be myself? How do I choose to be myself over trying to make other people happy? And that's a question that, of course, as I just said, this is like at the forefront of my work right now and in my practice, and it's drawn me particularly to a lot of different kinds of teachers right now, that are they're just showing me all kinds of ways to allow Dharma to kind of show up. And it's been so, I don't know, um, restorative for me. I feel as if my practice has been restored because I'm being shown how to practice and how to be in the world as myself, as a least or a less violent version of Rod, and that's really all I'm going for. Like my basic ethic right now is like to cut through violence, to be less violent. That's, you have to dumb it down. Like I don't have all these lofty aspirations anymore. I'm just like trying to get up in the morning and trying to be as less violent as possible. I'm trying to be as kind as possible. I'm trying to be as open-hearted as possible. I'm trying to do my work as much as I can. This is just a very, 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 very basic things, yeah, and I can't name all these lists of things we should be doing, and like I can, barely remember the Eightfold Noble Path, like all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know, but what I do know is how to speak kindly, how to speak truthfully, how to, to be generous, how to go to my edge. I know how to take responsibility for my discomfort and my suffering. I try not to blame other people. I try to be open-minded, and I try to offer as much to the world as I can. It's just all I'm doing right now. That's my resiliency plan. At the same time, I'm also taking care of myself. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm resting, I'm eating, I'm exercising, I'm practicing, I am, finding joy, I am, doing the things that I need to do, and not saying, oh, why am I trying to do this? So many other people in the world don't have access to this, and we have so much going on with the ICE raids, and we have so much going on, with the government and this president and the environment and the criminal justice system and drugs and famine, and racism and misogyny and this and that. And that's always going to be the issue, but like that shouldn't be an impediment to taking care of ourselves. We should be deeply concerned with taking care of ourselves and providing care for ourselves, because that's the only way we're going to be sustained enough to address all these fundamental systematic imbalances. So I don't mind sleeping. I don't mind spending my money on things that are restorative. I don't mind doing that thing because I know that I'm trying to give as much as I can back into the world. And self-indulgence means that like I take care of myself, but I stay isolated, And self-indulgence and self-care can look like the exact same thing, but it's about the intentionality. Do I intend to do this self-care thing and to return back into doing the work to liberate beings? So if I choose not to return back into the work and to stay in my self-care thing, well past what I need, I'm actually self-indulgent. And that's actually an act of violence for the world, because I'm taking resources that I don't need. Instead, I'm just kind of, just staying there doing something. I'm not offering anything back to the world, So that's not to say that like, maybe we should spend a really, really long time doing self-care. And some of us actually really need to spend a long time doing self-care and resourcing ourselves and restoring ourselves, because we're so deeply depleted, and that may be like years of self-care. I spent over 3 years in meditation, and a 3-year retreat. I definitely see that as self-care and self-preservation. I needed that 3 years in order to be in the world right now. So you need to take as long as you need to take, but at the end of the day, your goal is to return back into doing the work of liberation. Okay, any other questions? I don't want to keep everyone past your bedtime. You know, if you're like me, I'm like a sleeping beauty, honey. Just as soon as 8:30 rolls around, I'm like, girl, where's this bed at, honey? Any other questions? You can put things in the chat. So if there's nothing else, then
Okay.
mhm.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Lama Rod, for teaching us. And thank you all for joining us for tonight's online Dharma Gathering. Just want to make a quick announcement that next week, Dharma Gathering, August 7th, Wednesday, August 7th, is with Jessica Ngima, who is an insight teacher. And her talk is titled Shame, a Bright Guardian of the World. And I will put the link in the chat box for everyone. And, remember, you can, this talk will be uploaded to your Vimeo in about 48 hours. You can always watch the talks live or on video. So Lama Rod, thank you again for teaching us. So beautiful. I got a lot out of it. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Gonna end the meeting.